Okay, welcome to episode 46 of the Sean McGuinness podcast. I hope you are having a great day or night or evening, wherever you are, whether you're listening to this doing your steps, which, as I said, a lot of people are. Boom, habit bundling, temptation bundling. I'm not sure if when you do temptation bundling, you have to combine something you like doing with something you struggle to do. I'm going to assume listening to my podcast is the bit where you like doing. Could be the exercise, the bit where you like doing, and you don't like to listen to this. But no, you should, because it's some good knowledge bombs in it. Whatever way, it's all good. Just have my coffee here. Apologies for that slurping noise. Although I know some people are into that. Someone saw me a YouTube video where people pay money to listen to other people chew their food. I can't remember what that is, where they have like cucumbers and pickles and they go up to the microphone and eat it, and they make lots of money anyway. It's a mad world, but it's yours for the taking. Now, normally I do this on a Monday, but I was thrown off a bit this week. I was tripped out. Somebody showed me this video, okay, of a doctor in England. You may have seen it. She's called the Fat Doctor. Now, this isn't going to be an episode of me slating her, but it's a way of creating interest and discussion on the topic around that. Okay, because it's easy to slate a lot of people in the fitness industry, the stuff they put out, but normally, like, there's merit to something within that. But they've just gone too far with it. So, for example, keto. There's merit. It's used for people with epilepsy. Can be used. Then it went to use for weight loss. So there's merit in a small use for a small percentage of people. But then people just gone too far with it. So you can't really say, okay, it's shit altogether. There's bits where it has its use, and a lot of the stuff will be the same within that different nutritional patterns. I wouldn't apply for the majority of the population, but at some point it came about because there was a somewhat of a use for it. So we're going to look at the same thing today. The Fat Doctor, that's her name. I'm not slagging her here. Came out and she was on Good Morning Britain, which is just as harmful for your health watching that as actually gaining weight. And this doctor had a debate with a diet expert. I don't know what that means. Some guy who's in the fitness industry as well, I think. And she was saying how she doesn't tell her patients to lose weight. She was kind of into more fat acceptance, so she was talking about how kids need more overweight and obese role models, how all the superheroes... I think that this is very polarizing the way she was saying it as well. And so yeah, she kind of went about saying that she doesn't encourage people to lose weight if they have a high BMI or if they're overweight for their age. Which obviously caused a bit of uproar, and hopefully people have enough common sense where they go, okay, it's like financial advisors telling people not to save money, or dentists not to brush their teeth. They know, but hopefully they know. But I was going to comment on a thing on Instagram, but I knew it's the worst thing to do, argue online. I think I've done it once before and it just ruined my whole week because you just think about replying, blah blah blah. So for the people I am trying to help with, my clients, or train face to face and online, it's not good for anyone. So I had a little Google search, and I read some other things that she was in the paper for, because obviously these views are very polarizing and media and papers love her. So there was something, the 4th of January, she's basically talking how I think she was kind of criticizing most doctors, they'll go in if someone's overweight or obese for their age or height, etc., BMI, which measures that. Doctors will straight away saying you need to lose weight, blah blah blah, and put it on them. One of the criticisms with the whole kind of medical field is that there's no good referral system. So doctors can say to someone, okay, you need to lose weight, but it's pointless because they're not trained in nutrition, or they're not trained in the field of fat loss and everything it encompasses. So, okay, it's like telling a poor person, go get rich. Yeah, how do I do that? Like, it's not as simple as that. So I think that was one of the criticisms, that the straight away doctors are bang. And she was criticising other doctors, their approach within that. Okay, so what we're going to talk a little bit about within that, and I think she talks about, she uses other markers of health as well, which obviously I'm all for. So she was saying she looks at that stuff, doesn't just judge a book by its cover. Again, we can argue both sides, because from every bit of research, as people gain more weight, certain markers of health decrease, they get worse in health. That doesn't always mean causation, so it doesn't always mean gaining weight causes this, but we can definitely see the correlation, and in most cases it does cause it. Okay, I think what she was arguing for, and there is a case that what's called metabolic benign obesity. So basically, there is a small percentage of people, for some whatever reason, that maybe just a bit, maybe overweight, but their health markers are good. Okay, we could probably see that. Again, there's lots of different things that will encompass this, genetic factors, etc. But maybe think, for example, like the rugby boys you see on TV, and the forwards, the bigger lads, they're probably overweight for the size, maybe, but I would assume they're pretty healthy. They exercise, they probably eat well, etc. within that. So she's probably arguing for that small percentage of people, which to be honest, is a very, very small percentage of people. And from every study we've seen, we know that, like, as I said, obesity is going to increase all these risk factors. So, without, or maybe in combination of looking at our BMI, and people might say, okay, BMI I heard is not good because people are muscly. Yeah, but again, the percentage of people that are muscly enough to put them in maybe an overweight or an overweight category is minimal. People always go look at The Rock. Yeah, but how many rocks do you see walking around? It's very minimal. And on that point, actually, they have even seen that even if someone has this, okay, and now this is again the outliers of the situation, just like the people that were healthy at an overweight weight. There's people that are at, like, bodybuilders, where they have so much muscle mass it actually puts them into the obese category. And some will say, well, of course they're healthy because they have a small percentage of body fat and they have all this large muscle mass. No, in fact, that they are just at risk of a lot of things, being because they are such a big size. So it puts such a big strain on the heart, blood pressure. We've even seen Big Thor, who's boxing Eddie, what's his name? Boxing the strongest man in the world, Eddie. Oh my god, I watch his YouTube stuff. Anyway, I watched the Day and the Night of Thor that was in that TV series. I don't know the name of it. I'm gone blank today. I need to drink a bit more of this coffee. You know what I'm talking about. He's about 200 kilos. Thor Bjornsson or whatever. And he has to take blood pressure medication, even though, like, he's a quote unquote professional athlete, because that size puts such a stress on your heart, etc. Anyway, so for people that argue BMI, okay, those people have a small percentage of body fat and are still at risk because they are such a size. Doesn't matter about fat to muscle. Okay, so in combination with looking at someone's BMI, there are other things that we can look at that some may go, oh, the fat doctor said I'm overweight, but I don't need to worry about it. Okay, well, let's look at the other markers of your health as well. Now, let me prerequisite this saying, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a physician. go get obviously specifics of this from a qualified practitioner that hopefully looks at all the other factors: nutrition, sleep, lifestyle, etc. This is just very general, specific information that I'm going to give. So don't go to your doctor and say, Sean said this. This is general guidelines. So what else can we measure? We can look at, firstly, a resting heart rate, which is easy to do without going to the doctor. So if anyone has Apple Watches or Fitbits or whatever, most of them say resting heart rate. For most people, below 60 into the low 50s is a good resting heart rate. And again, it will depend on your age, etc. But you can probably look up a lot of this stuff online. And resting heart rate is such an easy one to use that as someone gets fitter and probably loses weight, increase their aerobic capacity, the resting heart rate will go down. So it means your heart's kind of getting stronger. There's less stress on your heart throughout the day. And that's such an easy way of looking at your fitness. We can look at, your doctor can look at your blood pressure. Okay? Again, such general guidelines. Your systolic 110 over 60 or whatever it is. As close as possible to that. Now, we're gonna look at it as well as we go, but just like this doctor said, I think one of the points she was getting at, well, hopefully, I'm gonna give it a benefit of the doubt, is that your BMI could be normal, but your health could be shit. And I've seen this a lot, and I'm gonna revert to myself as well. So you could look good, shredded, etc. That doesn't mean you're healthy. So most of the time, if you're overweight, you probably are unhealthy. But simply being in your range for your weight doesn't mean you're healthy. There's a lot of people that look great, their blood pressure all off. Again, if I go to the gym, you can hear people juiced up, jacked. They're breathing, the resting heart rate's probably 70, 80, their blood pressure's through the roof, their head looks like it's about to explode. So we can measure that as well if you're looking at a holistic view. So with my clients, a lot of the time I'll send them to a doctor first. They might do bloods. We're gonna look at all these markers anyway. And in combination with them dropping body fat, if the goal is to look better, we have all these other markers that we can look at that we can see their health's getting better, longevity's getting better, all these risk factors. We can obviously do blood tests. Your doctor can do blood tests. Some basic markers of what's called metabolic disease, which is kind of encompasses like your risk for heart attack, diabetes, some of the main quote unquote diseases that are around now, which are mostly lifestyle driven. You can look within that, again, your cholesterol levels. There's certain ratios that you want to hit between your good cholesterol, your bad cholesterol. Having a certain level of HDL, which is good cholesterol, and an LDL. I'm not going to get into cholesterol and that subject because obviously I'm not qualified here, but what I've heard, it's a vast deep hole. Within this stuff as well, nutrition can be very specific. So for example, cholesterol, you probably heard that like saturated fat is you probably want to limit your saturated fat if your cholesterol's high, etc. Yeah, and fat loss can be correlated with lower cholesterol. Good example of this, I got my mum. She had high cholesterol there. Kind of a little wake up call. She came in. She started to listen to some of the stuff I said, even though I'm like, Ma, you do know people pay me for this. She was kind of reluctant. Then as we increased her steps, got her food a bit better quality, started to train. She's done it 2 blood tests in between. And then that was a few months ago. Cholesterol levels are back to normal now. And when she went into the doctor, and again, I'm not trying to criticize it, it's more the system that doesn't have the capabilities, the medical system, to be able to look at all this stuff comprehensively in combination with how your lifestyle affects it. And no point was the doctor telling her to exercise or to maybe look at the quality of her food. It was kind of like, here, take some of these statins. And I said, okay, Mom, let's just do this, blah, blah, blah. And without even taken any, we've got that back to normal. HDL, LDL, etc. So these are kind of measures of your overall health, and again, the metabolic disease that is such a big part of Western society. We can look at like markers of inflammation, triglycerides, C-reactive protein, hemoglobin A1C. So find a good doctor that can look at that. That's a simple measure of, okay, are you healthy? Look at these markers of inflammation, inflammatories, processes which obviously increase the rate of disease. We want our body to be kind of mostly anti-inflammatory, not pro-inflammatory. Within blood tests, we can look at nutrient deficiencies, common ones, iron. You might look at magnesium, zinc, vitamin D. Even being in Australia, that's the case. People are low on that. And there's certain ranges that you want to be in within that. Now, different doctors differ on the ranges. One criticism that people have with blood tests is that they're comparing a range of mostly sick people, or like comparing a big range. So the reference ranges are very big. I've dealt with doctors where they deal with a smaller reference range within that. So instead of dealing with like, okay, you're either sick or you're healthy. Well, if you're like one, whatever measure of that away from being sick, you're classed as healthy. Well, you're not healthy. You're just not sick. Absence of disease doesn't mean health. So certain doctors will look at smaller reference ranges and say, again, people where I've worked with doctors and done these kind of tests, well, obviously the doctors interpreted, I just sent them there. There are plenty of people that are quote unquote look good but have heaps of nutrient deficiencies. Ironically, in Australia, loads of people are deficient in vitamin D. If you probably cut out iron, if you've gone vegan, maybe cut out meat, maybe iron, which a lot of people are anemic, such a high prevalence, zinc, magnesium, etc. We need around, I think, 40 micronutrients for our body to function properly. All these things are cofactors for the basic big engine that goes on. So if you maybe look good, or if you're overweight and you're very nutrient deficient, well, you're not healthy, because your body's not getting the nutrients it needs to be able to obviously stop disease, strengthen the immune system, everything it does, function on a day-to-day life, and just support cell function, which our body what's made up of. Outside of that, we can also look at hormones, different ways of looking at that, saliva tests, etc. We can some basic cortisol, testosterone, thyroid, blah blah blah. Again, I'm brushing over that because endocrinology is like, it's so complicated. To say it's complicated would be to be an understatement, obviously. But I know enough to be able to refer out again to people way smarter than me. And even within that, like, there are plenty of people that we probably may see on Instagram who take exogenous outside hormones such as testosterone, i.e. steroids, and they may look absolutely brilliant in the speedos, but physiologically have fucked themselves up, is the scientific term, I think. So yes, and obviously as people gain weight, they're one of the mechanisms of many that can go on is within that, if it's males, the testosterone can drop down. Obviously, the more body fat they have, because they convert that excess testosterone into estrogen, because estradiol, the process, complicated process, etc. stuff as well within that. So yeah, we want to look at that as obviously overall health, make sure these markers of our hormones are in check as well. We could look at fasting glucose, which can tell how insulin sensitive or insulin resistant you are, which means, are you on your way to diabetes, type 2 diabetes? Obviously, type 1 is a genetic one. Type 2 is more lifestyle one. So, there again, correlation as you gain more weight, your risk for diabetes goes up. And you can be just behind that. So, you could be pre-diabetic, where you're getting a lot of the symptoms that go on with this, doing a lot of the damage, and you may not be considered type 2 diabetic, but you're nearly there and you're wrecking your body. So we want to look at that as well. In regards to fitness, we can look at your VO2 max. There may be some simpler ways to do it, but a lot of the time you can go to a lab and get hooked up and do the whole heart rate. They put a mask on you, they measure your VO2 max, your ability to kind of maximum ability to use oxygen. A simple one which most people can do at home is a waist to hip ratio. That can give you a kind of predictor again for diabetes. So go, I don't have the ranges written down here, go and look it up, waist to hip ratio, and what kind of classifies as more dangerous. Which again, when most people, if they see someone who's overweight, they'll go, okay, your waist to hip ratio is, you have a big waist to hip, so look at that as well. Within that, you can look at waist size is a predictor for all these risk factors. Even more so in men specifically. You ever see the men that kind of look like they're pregnant, and when you might hit the stomach, you go, that's solid, all bought and paid for, while they're drinking a pint. But that specifically is a very big predictor of heart attacks. That because that's even more visceral fat, so subcutaneous visceral fat around the organs within that. So you can't pinch it. It's not too much outside fat, but that fat is all around your organs. So that's not a good kind of future where you're at. Stool tests, your immune system, your gut covers many things, from your mental health to your immune system to how you're breaking down food. So for people with digestive issues, I referred out for stool testing, see what's going on. I was actually listening to something interesting today. Luke Lehman, I think, was talking how over here a lot of influencers go to Bali and Thailand. They take lots of pictures, or they might be online coaches and they go over there and kind of parade how well they're doing when rent costs about 5 cents a day. And they get parasites because obviously that those being third world countries where our bodies are not adapted to that. You might drink some water in the shower, and developing parasites, obviously a big problem. And they can stuff you up, stuff your digestion up. So again, not as it talked about as much within the traditional field. But yeah, just be aware, as I was talked about before, if you're burping and you're farting and you're gassy all the time, that's not normal. It shouldn't be like that. So something going on there. What other ones can we look at? And that's a basic overview. Now, I think what this woman was also saying is that health is, we need to look at a holistic view in regards to health, which I definitely agree with, but she's going to be too far with our message. But we can look at that as well. So within our overall health, not only are these absolute physical markers that we want to look at govern kind of how well our body's doing, is it getting the right stuff to be able to function properly, risk factors for all heart disease, diabetes, again the major killers that being overweight is correlated with. But other aspects which probably not talked about as much, kind of social aspect. We are social species. I think, I can't remember, is there a book, Lonely is a bigger killer than smoking, loneliness? And the guy basically talks about how being on our own, now don't get me wrong, I love being by myself, but I'm not like, I don't isolate myself for long periods of time. What can happen when people do that, and it's ironic what I'm talking about now, because a lot of time it's not in our control, or it maybe highlights even more that if you are in lockdown, we need to be as productive as we can of trying to see people or organising Zooms, etc. There's very high cortisol release when we're not with people. One of the evolutionary kind of psychologists theorized that if you get thrown out of a pack, you're not going to survive that long. So it's a big kind of stress on your brain, and that's not a fun time. So because there's a lot of stuff going on. Obviously, we don't need to talk about the all the negative connotations with cortisol, but I thought that was an interesting one. So social, even one thing people are lacking, unfortunately, people those in lockdown, is the touch element of social situations. We had Danny from Sigma Nutrition talk about that, how that releases oxytocin, which is a big protector of a brain. It's kind of like in the same realm of endorphins, where it's a really good chemical that combats stress in itself. So touching, shaking hands, obviously, or touching elbows seems a bit weird, but it has to be done when things get back to normal. Hugging, etc. We were laughing, even we're talking about jiu-jitsu, how that jiu-jitsu, you get oxytocin from just grappling people, even though you're trying to strangle each other. It's a very natural thing. Now, obviously, ask for their permission first before you jump on them. But that was interesting as well. We could, within a health stratosphere, we could look at purpose, which is, now, a lot of time I'll slag off. Wasn't on top of this today, but we're here now. I always slag off bodybuilding and stuff a little bit, purely because of the negative connotations it gives off to the general public, and when people try to use that approach for the layperson, that's where it gets dangerous, because you use an extreme approach where a moderate one's needed. An extreme approach is counterproductive. However, I do acknowledge why people compete themselves, because it gives them a sense of purpose and goal. And humans need that. They need something to get up for in the morning, that they're aiming for this goal, and then when they hit it, they're getting that feelings of the dopamine release, the accomplishment that goes with it as well. I think Customado, Mike Tyson's trainer, he said when he was training Mike in his later years before he passed away, he told everyone that Mike Tyson basically gave him an extra 5 or 10 years, I think he said, because of the purpose and the will to live, to get up for in the morning. Which, when I've dealt with people who've retired, well, they hate it because they have nothing to get up for. They need that. So a sense of purpose, which is obviously absolutely massive. But again, it's very hard to measure these things, but we just need to take them into account. From a psychological point of view, there's not really any tests that I know of that can look at your overall happiness. There's happiness scales out there, but your psychological health, unfortunately, there's not as much psychometric testing that I know of, as I said, done on that to be able to see where we're at. But again, anxiety, depression, that stuff requires both physiological and psychological help. So if someone's overweight, okay, the overweight thing mightn't be causing depression. That's silly, but sometimes it's a chicken and egg scenario where some physiological issues can manifest themselves as psychological, and vice versa. So it needs to be treated together. Within psychological help, and with slowly becoming a little bit more prevalent, hopefully it keeps going, is the use of psychologists the same way we use nutritionists, trainers, doctors, because there's trauma when we're growing up. There is certain thinking styles, we've developed certain stigmas, we've developed certain ways of seeing the world, which obviously when we're children, we're not in control of a child, and someone may have said something that fucked you up, or some kind of abuse growing up, or we've developed certain thinking styles from growing up, etc., that may need to be dealt with to be able to prosper with our physical health as well. because obviously if we don't challenge these thinking styles, whatever way they are, if they're really negative impacting, that's going to dictate your behavior, and that's going to dictate the results. So again, going back to what we originally talked about with doctors saying, oh, you just need to lose weight, cool, but what if that person's overeating is down to childhood abuse when they're growing up? Unless they target that, that's going to be the complete roadblock to them ever losing weight. And then other aspects which are not talked about as much, referring to last week's podcast, is small stuff, small which may manifest themselves as big stuff, such as breathing mechanics. The fact that we're supposed to nasal breathe, and breathing through our mouth can develop all these problems and develop low level cortisol, stress relief for our body, and disrupt our sleep. Looking at lifestyle factors, how's your sleep going on to that? Okay, because if you're not sleeping, no matter what weight you are, or if your sleep quality shit, you're not going to be in good health. That's a fact. How's your stress levels? Do you have coping mechanisms to deal with these stress? Okay, so some stuff that outside we can tell on kind of a blood test. So yes, there we go. So that's just, again, brief overview of some markers that we can use to look firstly at a rate of progress, which I'll use with people, like I talked about, non-scale victories. That, okay, if someone comes in to try to lose weight, I think it's great to look at all these other markers of health and fitness. And as we see them go in the right direction, we know our body's getting in a better position. And that in itself creates success, which then breeds success, etc. Whereas if someone isn't aware of all this stuff, the blood pressure may have dropped back to normal range. The VO2 max may have increased. The resting heart rate's dropped down, but they never measured it. But that a lot of people need to see these metrics go down. And so if the weight doesn't, at least this is confident enough, because we know weight isn't linear every week, doesn't drop every week or even every 2 weeks. So we need to keep ourselves in the game with this kind of stuff, and it's great to see. In regards nutrient deficiencies, obviously, if I get someone in, if they want to be at optimal health, we need to look at, okay, and I'll work with a nutritionist, whatever, what foods can we get the stuff that you're lacking in? If that's not possible, okay, then we may need to lead to supplementation if needs be. But again, the looking if you can get from the food first probably is better, because it's not only the nutrient within that food, but there's loads of other cofactors and mechanisms within food that work together. For example, I heard Dr. Rhonda Patrick talk about, they got this bar, a chocolate bar, but a bar, like a nutrient bar, and had all these nutrients that people are deficient in, got their bloods, gave them to the randomized group with this bar alone, and then another bar they used had fiber in it. And the group that had the fiber in the bar, I think, absorbed the better or got better health results from that. So again, if we look at veggies, people may just say, okay, well, fuck it, I'm not going to eat the vegetables, I'll just take the supplement. Well, looking at that, we're not looking at all the other stuff that's within the fruit or veg, the fiber, all these other maybe nutrients that work together to create the bioavailability for your body to be able to use that nutrient, etc. So coenzymes and all this other kind of stuff that work together rather than just the nutrient alone. If we can't get it from the food, okay, obviously then look at supplementation, etc. from that as well. And even within the waist measurement, someone that beginning weight training, again, it's not going to happen to everyone, but there's a certain kind of beginner stage where somebody may start training and there's a possibility in the first few weeks for them to lose fat and gain muscle. So they mightn't show up as much on the scale because that person may have built a bit of muscle and lost body fat. Primarily happens within guys or girls that are more athletically gifted. And so this guy, basically weight stayed the same, but he's dropped 10 centimeters off his waist, and a lot from the visceral fat, the fat underneath the skin around the organs, because when I go to do his pinch test, his actual skin on his stomach seems flabbier. Because before it was so inflamed that all the fat was pushing out, that the skin's so tight. Now it feels like he has more fat, but obviously he's dropped 10 centimeters, and specifically from that dangerous type of subcutaneous visceral fat. And then we can look at all these other markers, as I said, as well. So there is merit in a tiny bit of what this woman is saying, encouraging people to get fat. However, you can go yourself, seriously, that's just dumb. But what we can take from that is not everyone in BMI range is healthy, and it's definitely not the case. Even myself, to a quick example before I go, is there was a time where I was doing probably 10 hours a day in the gym floor, training hard, just working off coffee, and then in between any breaks I would just be studying absolutely non-stop. It's not sleeping enough. And then at that stage, I talked about before, I had a mad panic attack after a few weeks or months of that, because my body's so stressed out, and I assume if I got my blood pressure would be through the roof, resting heart rate would be higher, all these markers would be higher, my cortisol would be off. So although I look great, didn't mean I'm healthy. Okay, so I think that's what we can take from it, as well as looking at health in a whole holistic view. So there you go. Hopefully that made somewhat sense. As I said, no doctor. Go get this stuff done. Work with doctors specialised in this field. Unfortunately, the public system a lot of the time isn't set up for that, because it's set up for people just to get in, kind of prevent you dying and then get out again. It's not set up to optimize your health. So over here, I've worked with doctors who may run private clinics where you go in and you look at all this stuff, run tests upon tests of all the stuff, look at your nutrition, look at your lifestyle, look at your exercise, look at your sleep, all the stuff which affect the markers, and then having a holistic view with everything. And obviously, if medicines needs to be treated, perfect, but let's treat all the other stuff which will further enhance that, rather than never looking at all the other stuff, which again is just as dumb. Boom. Okay, hopefully that helped a little bit, open up that field a little bit. As I said, if wherever you are in the world, if you need a doctor to maybe refer out to, or look a bit further into this stuff, let me know. I know some good ones in London, Dublin, Sydney, in Australia, etc., that refer people online, etc. And yeah, there we go. Just the main point of this is never watch or get your health advice from morning, daytime, or definitely not nighttime TV. So yes, as always, please rate and review. I really appreciate it. Let me know your feedback. Send me a DM on Insta, or email sean@liveonperformance.com. And yeah, have a great morning, evening, or wherever you're in the world. And I'll see you on the next episode.